Hello, 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 South by. Happy Sunday morning. I'm so excited right now because this is my first South by Southwest, and I just found out it is all of our first South by Southwest, so this makes it even more exciting because number one, I want to make sure that we thank South by as well as the Sway Effect and Jennifer Reese and her entire team for curating this amazing conversation. Today is extra special because we're going to have a fantastic conversation about predicting culture to power brand momentum, and I have a phenomenal just team of people right here. Their stories are going to be amazing. First and foremost, we have Justine Palefsky. She is CEO and co-founder of Kindred. We have Matt Navarro, CEO of Stanley 1913, and then of course Jiayu Lin, CEO of PopSockets. So let's get started. And I'm Jameer Smith, radio personality. Let's go. First of all, on my show, I typically like to ask everybody, and as we are in this space, in this world, how are you and how's your heart? We can start with you, Justine.
What a wonderful way to open this. I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be here. I think next South by, I will plan further in advance. There's a lot to do, so I'm excited, but a little, experiencing FOMO for all the things that I missed this weekend. So next time I'll do it better. That's how I'm doing.
Same.
Yeah, great question. Good morning, everybody. I think I likewise have not seen any music yet, which is unfortunate, so hopefully I'll get to do that and do South by a little better next year. My heart's full. I think being with some members of my team, but then also over the last couple of days, just being able to connect, be with, and talk to and ask questions of really bright, brilliant people is an awesome opportunity for us.
Yeah, I feel very nourished, stimulated, a curiosity I was able to squeeze in a few sessions and even a music performance yesterday. Such a rich world out here, and definitely want to plan it better next time, I'll reserve for a few sessions so that it's even a richer experience.
So I want to get into our first piece, cultural intelligence and leadership. Many leaders talk about trends, but fewer talk about cultural intelligence. For all of you, how do you personally train yourself and your teams to notice cultural shifts early before they appear in reports or data dashboards? Justine?
Yeah, so I think one of the frameworks that we talk about a lot at Kindred, and for those who are not familiar, Kindred is a global home swapping platform. So it's a community-driven travel model where people match on our app and stay in one another's homes instead of having to spend a bunch of money on hotels or short-term rentals, and really kind of get to know each other and form connections all around the world through doing so. So I think that for us, we talk about being a student of problems as much as we are a student of technology. I think right now I see a lot of entrepreneurs or people with technology that's kind of in search of a problem. But if you pay attention to what consumers are struggling with, what is an experience or a service that is too expensive, it's too hard, it's a bad experience, the wonderful thing about humans is if there's a problem, at some point, somebody's gonna try to solve it. And so often that's a way of telling kind of what innovation is coming around the bend. It's an area where there's a huge problem. If there's a big problem, somebody's going to innovate there. So we pay close attention to where is a need, where is something that needs to be solved in order to try and predict what's coming next.
Yeah, I think Stanley 1913 has been around for over 110 years now, hence the 1913. That's our founding year. And I think we've been able to really reinvent ourselves 3 or 4 times over a century of history. And if I try to think about what that common denominator is as a leader, it's staying close to the consumer. And so as I look at my role and our leadership team's role, one of the things that we're spending a lot of time on is making sure that we're talking to the people inside and outside of the company that are closest to the consumer. As you get in a global leadership team, sometimes you become really insulated from that. And then you end up making decisions based on what people inside the building think, maybe even what your retail buyer thinks, and you lose that connection to consumer. So I think building that community, making sure you're listening to your community, and that your leadership team's actually in markets talking to consumers is really important.
Yeah, I really agree with Matt here. So we're PopSockets. The company has been around since 2014. That's when we launched, the phone grip. We are the category creator of the phone grip. We're very fortunate to enjoy the fact that consumers call almost any phone grip a PopSockets. But you're right. Since we launched, it was like iPhone 4 or 5 at the time. Now technology has evolved a lot, and we stay close to consumers, also through social listening and staying close to how people use their devices. As we say today, that our next product brief or partnership proposal actually live in the comments section of our social. We get the best ideas from our consumers, and like everyone has a phone, so we do look out in the wild and how people use their phone, engage with their phones. We today have thousands of designs, and we truly get our ideas from small communities with unique passion points living around us. We have them on our team, but also we really stay close to the content creators and users who talk about their passion points, whether it's on TikTok, Reddit, and all of those places.
Matt, Stanley has experienced explosive growth partly through unexpected cultural communities online. How do you decide when to lean into a community-driven moment versus when to protect the brand's long-term identity?
Yeah, I think it's both, and it's balance is the first thing I would say. We have a really strong heritage, and that history and heritage future-proofs us and really just helps us to have much more sustainable, profitable growth for the future. And I think a big reason or a big way that we're doing that is, again, making sure that we're listening to our communities. If I take the quencher that went viral as an example, that product was in 2020, 2021, kind of floundering a bit. And we had a close social connection to influencer group called the Buy Guide in Utah. And our listening to them, working with them, was really the early stages of the Stanley Quencher's virality. And frankly, after that, consumers just took it to a place beyond what we could even imagine. And so I think it's staying connected and rooted in your history and foundation, but also being willing to listen to, again, to consumers. Most of the times, the products that have made it for us and have been very popular are stress tested with consumers. The ones that miss are generally an anecdotal point of view or anecdotal points of view without really stress testing with consumers.
Jiayu, technology and products evolve quickly, but human behavior evolves extremely slow, right? How do you and your team design products that anticipate how people want to interact with technology in the future rather than react to how they use it today?
Yeah, so sometimes consumers actually tell us they're actually ahead of us in terms of how they use our products, and other times we find opportunity to serve them in a way that they didn't even expect. For example, we launched recently Kindle case with grip, exactly because actually our consumers started using our phone grip on their Kindle devices. It helps them hold the device better, and also they decorated Kindle cases in a way that incorporates more DIY elements, more crafty, and more so than the phone case use. And we really leaned into that, and then developed a whole series of bookish collections for book lovers. That's the elements of fantasy books, the daggers and dragons, and it really got popular. So that really inspired us to create products for them. And then we also created, like foam straps, and our tops are swappable, so we put, charms on them. So that's combining a few trends that we observe, right? And also, as, let's say, if you're a mom, you need a third hand, right? Like in all the things that you do and with all the things you carry. Or if you're a festival goer, like you're dancing while capturing content. So like, straps and, our grips can really help you. And in those use cases, we are rooted in our product history. We sought to find solutions for consumers on the problems that they have, but with a solution that they probably didn't think of.
Yeah. Justine, travel historically is centered around transactions, and Kindred has shifted that towards relationships and community, which I absolutely love. What cultural insight made you believe travelers increasingly seek connection over convenience?
It's a good question. Thank you for it. I think the core insight was really that we're at a moment in time where people are really craving human connection and community. And I think there are a lot of different macro forces that created the place that we are in right now. You have a couple decades of social media that was supposed to make us feel connected, but ended up making us feel more isolated and kind of performative in our relationships. You have a decade or more of consumer tech that was all centered around making everything as frictionless as possible. Make everything accessible with the click of a button. You don't have to talk to another human. You have the pandemic, which I think really changed what the workplace feels like for a lot of people, especially young people. They don't have that kind of social community through their workplace anymore. So all these factors, I think, led to people feeling disconnected. And when you look at travel, travel became about collecting photos for your Instagram, instead of about immersing yourself in a new place, connecting to people there and discovering a new version of yourself. And that's the richness, of travel. And so I think we saw this kind of there's an action and a reaction. Sometimes the pendulum swings a bit too far in one direction and it starts swinging in the other. And we really saw that happening, not just with travel, but across kind of culture. So I think that the core insight was people really value a form of travel that gets back to what we loved about travel in the first place. It's about getting to know other people, it's about stepping into somebody else's life, and it's about forming little, connections with the people who you meet. And so I think that was the kind of core insight behind maybe people are actually willing to take on a bit more friction in order to get that kind of richer experience. In the same way that people it used to be the coolest thing ever to have your Nespresso machine or your Keurig, like make coffee in one click, and now people are like, forget that, I want my French press, even though it's harder, there's more bits and bobs to clean, it takes longer, but there's something more artisanal about it. It's a richer experience, and so that's this kind of cultural shift, I think, toward actually maybe a little bit of friction is okay for a more meaningful, richer experience.
I still have my Keurig. Listen, I've had a lot of conversations this weekend about data versus instinct, and brands now have access to more data than ever before. Yet predicting that culture still requires intuition. When your data and your instincts disagree, which one usually wins? Jiayu.
Data and instincts, I think we lean toward interactive, right, consumer research and observation. The grip, our founder used to be a CU Boulder professor, so he, would gift his class with our prototypes of products, and today he still, he no longer teaches, but he will still go back to campus every so often, talk to college students, go to sorority houses and watch how they interact with their phones. we still very much test our products, and like how we're launching some new innovations. Like, how do you use it? How would you like we were launching some products of different depths, and consumers might get tripped up by things that you didn't expect, or they develop a new functionality that you didn't expect. Again, our grip was invented to solve his own problem with entangled phone cords, right? Today it's no longer like a common problem, but it's through consumers where we discovered that they actually prefer to use, and he stuck 2 sets of buttons to be like these 2 grips that can then be your core organization system. But actually the one grip as as an extension of your arm, as you take a selfie or to hold your phone better, these are what actually consumer taught us. And then without that insight, we wouldn't have been able to sell millions, hundreds of millions across the world. So today, that still rings very true for us. Sure, we read the data, right? Like macro data of which segments, and then people are profiled, consumers are segmented. Whether you use demographic or psychographic, like all these tags. But really, today we still go back to how interact with humans. That be our teams, their friends. Sure, we make sure that we have a diversity of consumers in the room or in multiple, in occasions. But friends, relatives, and consumers in the wild. We collect that feedback every day. Again, we're very fortunate to be producing, to be making a product that could potentially serve pretty much everybody, and we use that to the maximum.
Matt and Justine, if you guys want to talk about anything when it comes to data versus instinct as well.
I would just add that one of the things I'm concerned about as a leader is we get paralyzed by data. Like for 2 or 3 years, we were like, we don't have enough data. We need a data lake. We need AI to be able to mine data for us. Now what I get concerned about is that I don't want data to suppress innovation, creativity, and originality. And so there are places in the business where we need to use data in order to target consumers, understand who our consumers are and where they are. But it needs to be used to validate creativity or products or design, or prove or disprove, versus suppress that creativity, if that makes sense. Because that's really what we're rooted in. Our brand is about originality, creativity, and we sell fun. We're selling cups for people to drink stuff out of. It's not rocket science, right? And that food and beverage experience is who we are. And so, I think we use it for sure, but I think we just have to be careful.
The one thing I'd add to that is I think we also need to look at what is your scale? What's the end that you are dealing with? So some of this might be stage dependent, right? If you're a startup and you don't have a huge volume of users, or it takes a long time for people, it takes a lot longer for somebody to get comfortable with home swapping, book a trip, get on it, than to buy a CPG product.
Or a beautiful cup.
The beautiful cup, which I bring to every meeting with me today. So in the earlier stages of a company, you're just not going to have enough data. You just don't. You have to rely on intuition, or else you will do absolutely nothing. If you're a product manager at Meta, you can run an A/B test, get millions of data points in a day, and that's really helpful. But not every business model has that kind of volume. So I think looking at your business will also tell you how much do you have to rely on, what is the meat that you can get from data versus relying on intuition.
Matt, Stanley 1913, some of their biggest momentum has come from consumer-led storytelling. How do you create an environment where customers feel like they are co-creating the brand narrative with you?
Yeah, I think we listen. That sounds really simple, but social media is I think even today, very much thought of as a megaphone, where it's actually the place where we should listen more, and I think our team does a really good job of that. And I think what it's also taught us is that what consumers want from us, what they expect from us, and the places and adjacencies and extensions for our brand that we can step into. You might have seen this week we launched the Vitalize collection, which is a shaker bottle, but there's also a suite of tote bags, backpacks, crossbody, to carry that works seamlessly with your drinkware and your hydration to go to the gym, to go to school, to go to the yoga studio, things like that. And that came from just listening or watching what consumers were doing and then figuring out how we could do it in a very Stanley way.
Getting into the community and cultural relevance, today's consumers build emotional relationship with brands, and this is for everyone on the panel. How do you ensure your brand remains authentic within communities rather than appearing simply just to market to all of us? Justine?
I think one hack is just to actually be friends with your customers. Truly, if you authentically want the best for your customers, I really think people will sense that. And it also changes how you show up. Speaking to the theme of staying close to the consumer, one way that we did that at Kindred was starting a Slack for early members so that we could just have open conversations with our customers and actually just ask them questions like, what do you guys think about this? Here's a, and having that really kind of casual conversation that really felt that we were friends who were co-creating something together instead of here people sitting in a formal focus group, giving us feedback with a researcher. I think really helped us make sure that as we roll out changes, we're doing so in a way that is truly co-created with our community. And so they will catch us, this feels wrong, or this feels,
actually.
Yeah, and if you're actually really friends with them, they can be honest with you, and so I think that has helped us make sure that we're showing up in a way that is really community driven, because you don't have to guess what your community will like or not like. You can actually ask them,
I think, a couple lenses that we use, just how we look at the business and how I try to make decisions, is one through our vision, mission, values. So I think if you can really be tight on what you believe in, what you stand for as a brand, that's a great way to be able to talk to consumers. And I do think it creates what you were saying earlier, which is it's a great way to create that connection in community that I think we're so fortunate and lucky to have. The other thing is I think we give people what they expect, but then we give them the unexpected. So how do we meet them in places in their lives, more places within their lives? It's a great, that's our growth strategy. How do we grow the business? But also surprises and delights the consumer if we do it the right way. And so I think, those two things for me are critical if we're going to remain relevant, for sure.
Yeah, we actually just refreshed, found our roots, but with a bit of update from the current team base of the company on the mission, vision, values just last year, and we decided we stand for building positive relationships between people and their mobile devices, right? We want to help you to hold it better, use it for your life better. But we also want you to, and this is, really a canvas for consumers to show their, to express themselves and show their identity and build that connection with the community. Whether you're passionate about a certain sport or a character or a passion for reading, you can give a subtle hint from the back of your phone, and you can find your like-minded community in the wild. So that's what's driving us actually for creating our products and stay authentic to ourselves. And we do ask ourselves, what are the emerging communities that we can serve? We found bookish, right? There's a bookish tag on TikTok. They're maybe not as served compared to other passion groups in terms of related merchandise, and so our efforts there really were received with a great response. So we look for opportunities in those communities to create products for.
Justine, trust is the core currency at Kindred. What generational cultural shifts have you noticed around how younger consumers define trust and belonging?
Yeah. So yes, trust is not just adjacent to our strategy. Trust is our strategy. We're not inventing home swapping, but it has been niche for many decades. And our bet was that we could deliver the trust that people needed for this to be a mainstream kind of third category in travel that could sit next to hotels, short-term rentals. People deserve a third option that's community-driven and more human. But in order to do that, we needed to crack this trust problem. What I've learned is that there is no silver bullet to trust, and that trust really is, you have to think about creating the conditions under which trust can emerge. There are some things that increase trust in general for everybody. One example is just, if you feel that you know somebody, and if you feel known by them, there is a natural feeling of trust that emerges. However, to your question, we definitely see differences among different cultures and generations with what creates the ingredients for trust. So when we were starting Kindred, we did a lot of asking members to use the app and just narrate out loud what was going on in their mind as they were doing it. So we could try and understand what is your psychology of how you're deciding who you're comfortable hosting in your home. We had this one woman, her name was Doreen. She's an empty nester, lived in Santa Fe. She was looking through and kind of using Kindred, reviewing trip requests, and for her, she really wanted to just get on a call with this person. She wanted to hear their voice, she wanted to get on a video chat, see their face. That was really meaningful. And when she did that, she was like, I love him. Paul seems like a great guy. I've looked him in the eye, he's looked me in the eye, I trust him. That was the kind of game-changing moment for Doreen. If we look at a different guy, this guy's name is Joe, Gen Z, really kind of online, younger. What he zooms to on the profile, he doesn't care about the video. He says, I don't need to video chat. I want to look at their social media. Does this person have a legit seeming social media? If they don't, that's weird, or they seem fake, or I don't know who they are. And having that kind of online footprint was really important for Joe to feel that he trusted someone. And so we kind of gathered all of these little breadcrumbs and tried to say, okay, how do we build a product that delivers all of these different trust signals for different people who care about different things? So let's allow people to upload video intros or opt for a video chat. Let's also have people link to their Instagram or their LinkedIn or their TikTok and just kind of try to throw all of the signals in there so that no matter who you are, there's something you can rely on to create this feeling of somebody not being a stranger, but being a friend that you just haven't had the chance to meet yet.
A large conversation that I've had this weekend at South by is innovation and risk. A lot of companies wait until the trend is fully validated before investing. When we think about the biggest risk of waiting too long and to act on cultural signals, Matt, when a brand becomes culturally hot, there's always the risk of overexposure sometimes, right? How do you sustain momentum with Stanley 1913 while protecting the brand from becoming a short-lived fad?
Yeah, I would agree. We've spent a lot of time on this over the last few years, as you can imagine. We're very fortunate that we have the 100+ year heritage that I spoke about earlier. But for me, it's diversification. We need to make sure that we were diversified in our consumer, who we were talking to. We need to build a globally diversified brand and business. So beyond North America, our fastest growing markets today are Asia and Europe, and key countries in those parts of the world. And then last, I referenced vitalized collection, but extensions and adjacencies in categories. So beyond hydration is what we call it internally, where we're spending a lot of time on mobility storage bags and coolers. Hot beverage is actually seeing and starting to have a moment right now. So our cafe collection, especially in places like Europe and Asia, where tea and coffee and hot beverages are a little more popular. And so when I think about future-proofing us for the future, it's those three areas of diversification that are key for us.
And Justine, when you think about, even with Kindred, founders often talk about product market fit, and Kindred is also about culture market fit. And how do you know when culture is ready for a new category?
Yeah. So I think one hack is when culture is ready for a new category, you start to see people kind of nibbling around the idea in their own hacky ways. So I think that was a weird way of putting that. Sorry. For home swapping,
I did home swap with a guy in a chairlift one time. This is true.
Really?
I meant to tell you this earlier.
That's
like
amazing.
5 years ago, guy was from California. We live in Park City. We swapped homes, just like met on the chairlift. Crazy,
Yeah.
right? So it was happening.
Totally. No, it's happening. Yeah. So what we started to see is like people were doing this, on their own. There was this big proliferation of Facebook groups, of people who had something in common, who wanted to sublet from each other or swap homes with each other. There were Reddit threads. Part of the idea for Kindred came from me personally myself wanting to be able to travel way more and not feeling like it was financially, reasonable for me to do so while I was also paying so much in rent in my place in San Francisco. And I started a Google Sheet with my friends and friends of friends, and everybody listed their places, and we had a little Dropbox link with our photos, and essentially we were like, all right, anybody have a place in New York City that's going to be empty? I will water your plants, I will take our packages in, I'm going to be a really good guest, I just need to, get out. And so we were ourselves kind of trying to stitch together this experience. And so I think that, when culture is ready for a new category, you see people trying to get at it by stitching together the tools they already have. There's this sort of pent up demand. People are trying to crack it. And I think those are the early indicators to an opportunity that's really ripe for a new category.
When we think of the future of culture and the brands, and this is for everyone on the panel, Jiayu, we can start with you. If we look 5 years ahead, what cultural shifts do you believe will fundamentally shape the consumer expectations of brands?
Yeah, one thing that we're really paying attention to, well, of course, it's time to bring AI into the room. You probably heard about multiple times, but
We almost went the whole time without talking about it.
it's time to go there. But we think, so this younger generation, right? Like we see them more and more use their devices as a media studio, meaning, like not only consuming contents, but creating contents really in such a volume, right? That might still be like unexpected, like as of today, in the future. And so, like I think, with AI increasing the productivity. So like, later when you want to create, build a solution, whether it's a software program or something else, it might take a much smaller team, right, to do it. So at that time, what's going to be really important is your distribution. So when you having like a small business owner, and more people will be, to have an audience and following. So their content creation behavior, right, is something. I think it's a big thing that's coming, and also as it intersects with our business, something we can really serve and help with. So today we do have an ecosystem, the products, a suite of things that we can help this generation create content like more often and also like more in a handy way that would really support them for their future small business powered by the increased productivity of AI.
Same thing there.
I think, Stanley is rooted in our values in sustainability and social impact. And I think consumers are caring more and more every day. And so being able to marry that cause in our business is becoming more balanced. And I think not easy to do, but easier to do. What I think we're going to see in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years is circularity become much more on consumers' mind, much more expectations of a business, of how do we create our product that is already made from recycled stainless steel, make that available to recycle, that then would be in the recycled material would be then in your next batch of Stanley cups or products, both in stainless steel, of plastics, and even in soft goods. So we're not there yet. We're spending a lot of time. We want to be on the forefront of that. but I think that's something we're thinking about in our business for sure.
That's really relevant for us as well. I think, one of the reasons why people are drawn to Kindred is because they want to be more conscientious of the impact that they're having on the city they're going to. And instead of staying in investment homes that take places off the market for locals and increase housing prices, it's really very peer-to-peer. They're staying in real homes, they're not paying each other cash, they're exchanging nights essentially. And we hear a lot of people who are drawn to this concept, not just because it's more affordable, and not just because it's a way to feel more connected and have a richer travel experience, but because they want to travel and not feel guilty that they're being part of the problem in exacerbating kind of over-tourism in the cities that they're going to. So totally agree that that's more and more kind of top of mind, I think, for the consumer. I think the other big trend that I think may also be related to AI, but is not exclusively related to AI, is just like affordability, is a problem right now for consumers. We're in a war, like the economy is uncertain. Who knows if AI is going to result in a bunch of white collar job loss, but even just the specter of that makes people more paranoid, makes people more concerned. How am I going to be able to live the kind of lifestyle that I want if I lose my job? And so I think that we're seeing this shift where finding ways to offer the services and experiences that people love that's part of a life well lived, but at a fraction of the cost, I think is going to become really powerful in this next chapter.
If someone, which I know in this audience, wants to build the next culturally defining brand, and this is for everyone, what is the first cultural signal they should start paying attention to now?
I think, I don't know that I would start with a cultural signal, if I'm being honest. I think I'd start with a vision, understand the mission of what you're trying to accomplish. I think I'd love what Justine has created in just the last hour of what I've learned. And it's more about a consumer need. So identifying something that can add value to consumers' lives. We talk about life in motion. That's like the Stanley consumers' lives are just constantly in motion. And so how do you meet them where they don't even expect you to show up? How do you solve a problem for them, maybe that they don't even know that they have yet? And then how do you create a company or a business or a group that has clear vision, mission, values, and then just be authentic. I think being genuine and authentic as we look at like partnerships and the spaces that we want to push into. I think that originality, authenticity, and being genuine to who you are is really important, and I think that's how you build the community more than trying to find signals, because that can be tricky.
Yeah, I definitely agree that if you're starting a business, you start with a consumer pain point you want to solve and something that you are somewhat uniquely positioned to solve. So there is a part that in you that's really core to just feeling for that problem and wanting to do something about it. And then cultural relevance second, right? Like obviously to launch something, market something, and make a product, service sustainable, you need to find that resonance within the consumers to speak to them and connect with them. I would go with that order as well.
Yeah, I would say look at your own life. You know what I mean? Like it is such a hack to build a product that you want to be a consumer of. Like that's you are deeply aware of the pain points in your own life and the trends that you're excited by and what your friends are doing. Like that's an amazing advantage. And I think starting with what you know and what you see in your own life can be a real hack.
We would love to take some questions from the audience. I know we have a mic in the back. If you guys want to come up to the mic and ask any questions to any of us, we would love that.
Hey, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
first of all, thank you for the great insights and great discussions. Yesterday I was watching a very nice panel when someone said that a brand is to really understand what the brand means when you leave the room and the people start to talk about the brand inside of the room. But I also said that the best brand is the one that is invited for the room. So my question is, talking about culture, assuming that, let's say if you're working like us in a pharmaceutical company where you have a strong culture that protects the success, how can you use the culture to break in the wall and put the brand inside of the room?
It's a lovely question. I can start.
You could write a book on that question.
Yeah, totally.
It's a big question, big question.
You know, I really believe in having your internal team's culture mirror the values that you are hoping to create for your consumers. For Kindred, as an example, we want people to feel authentically themselves and welcome. We want people to be able to show up on the other side of the world to a city they've never been in and feel like they belong. We want our customers to be really conscientious. You know, we want them to give a shit about how other people feel and how they're impacting other people. If we want our customers to be feeling that way and we want our brand to stand for those kinds of values, we need to make sure that we're living those values internally as employees in our team. What can we do internally to make sure that we're showing and rewarding employees that give a shit about other employees and are conscientious about other employees? How can we create a space internally where people feel that they belong, where they can be their authentic selves? Because that's the kind of experience and set of feelings that we want our customers to have. So when you have that kind of synchronicity with how you behave in a closed room, along with what you want your external brand to stand for, I think people feel it. You know, it helps it become much more natural. It's how you treat each other internally as a team. It seeps through to the experience that you're providing for your customers.
Yeah, I love this topic. I spend a lot of time on it. I think it matters. I think all successful companies have, good culture. I think what culture means to me, culture is a hard thing to describe, first of all. I don't think there's a clear definition. How I try to define it is, how does a company make you feel? That simple. When you walk in a room, how does that company and being in that environment and being in that building or being in that meeting, how do people make you feel? And vice versa. And to me, that's what culture means. And so not to root it back to vision, mission, values again, you guys can tell that's important to me. Vision is your aspiration, mission is how you're gonna get there, and values is how you're gonna treat each other. And so when we talk about things like stronger together, it's teamwork. When we talk about being creators, builders, and inventors, it's no bad ideas. We have Own It, which is around accountability and responsibility and being able to be yourself. My favorite one is Play to Win. I'm a sports freak. If we're gonna be in a market, we wanna compete and win. We state that. And so I think, as Justine said, you kind of have to live it, but I think you also have to make sure that it resonates and make sure that it almost seeps into the business. And it's just ultimately how you make people feel.
Hi, my name is Tia, and this question is probably more for you, Matt. So I am Vice President of Marketing for a top 10 cable network that's very niche. We air Westerns, we're called INSP. We also have a streaming platform called Western Bound. And so we have really sort of targeted an older demographic, very niche, that loves classic Westerns. Given Stanley's sort of history and legacy, being more for the ranchers, the workers, the people that, can aspire like John Wayne, I know you guys have collaborated with them. Curious, if you didn't have that moment with the influencers in Utah, I think you said, how would your brand have evolved without alienating that or hardworking audience?
Yeah, what a great question. I think not an easy one to answer, but I'll say this. You know, I referenced it earlier. Stanley's been able to reinvent themselves now 3 or 4 times. Previous to the '60s, we helped America go to work. We were on job sites and construction sites around the world. Once quick service food and vending machines and fast food became available, we helped fuel outdoor adventures, and that's really the outdoor, how Stanley stepped into the outdoors mid-1960s or so. And then outdoor got pretty crowded and actually a space that's shrinking a bit, although we still have a strong foothold there. We looked at it as, frankly, what are consumers using the most? And in 2019, 2020, the first decision was hydration in cold liquid. And then we found a space that was pretty stale, if I'm being frank. There were, you know, what I would call legacy companies making not a lot of innovation, not a lot of originality. We targeted a female consumer who wasn't being spoken to. We executed what our product guy called the color revolution. You know, we put color and lifestyle and fashion into beverage vessels that nobody was doing at the time. And we stayed really core to our promise of durability, quality, and sustainability. And so I looked at that heritage, that connection to, you know, the John Wayne era as the greatest gift any brand or any leader could have, because everybody had an emotional connection to our brand. They just might not have heard of us in the last 25 or 30 years. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's like a little bit of the background of how we maybe reinvented ourselves now three or four times.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for a great panel. I had a question for Justine. Well, first of all, I love the sort of brand and business you're building with Kindred. Been meaning to list my house in Kindred, so this is a good reminder. I'll try to do it when I get home.
I'll give you an invite.
Love it. I'm curious, like, Airbnb is a brand I know intimately and through work and stuff. I'm a brand strategist by trade, and it feels like, from an outsider perspective, your ethos is like quite similar. It's like different product offerings, and probably audiences a bit, but of like kind of like live like a local, belong anywhere, like that kind of ethos, which I love and I think the world needs more of. Do you view them like, how would you pull apart the two brands? And like, do you think about them actively in terms of like your positioning, and or do you even view them as sort of like almost analogous and a bit of a partner of like, well, someone's more likely to rent on Airbnb, they want that local travel feel, and maybe they'd be more likely to be a Kindred user. Yeah, I'm just a brand strategist, so sorry to like drill down into the sort of positioning of it all.
No, I appreciate the question. I think that, you know, when I think about brands, and in particular a brand like Airbnb, I look at what is to the question before, what are people saying when they're not in the room? What is the reputation? How does the product feel? More than what is the content in their ads or their brand campaign. You know, because sometimes there can be a difference there. And I think that the reality is that Airbnb's model and the short-term rental model of paying to stay somewhere results in the professionalization of supply over time. And I think that's what we've seen, where now the vast majority of Airbnb's revenue is coming from, you know, investment properties that the user is a profit maximizer. They've gotten a home to make some extra income, and so that product experience, even if the kind of original promise of, you know, belong anywhere, you know, home sharing was different, that the reality that many consumers are experiencing is one that feels like a transactional rental experience in a home that doesn't have a ton of character. So I think that the actual product experience is very different between the two, and I think that the opportunity still exists kind of on the table to really be delivering a product that feels truly community driven, that feels peer-to-peer, that feels more connected and human. And so certainly, you know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for what Airbnb has built, and I don't think there would be a Kindred if Airbnb hadn't normalized staying in other people's homes and, you know, things of that nature, but it felt that there was a large opportunity to deliver on the promise of community-driven home sharing that so many people wanted, but felt that they didn't get.
Yeah. I love that. I'm staying in an Airbnb this week, and it's definitely a rental property. And looking forward to actually getting the Kindred experience eventually. Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you. Very interesting panel. I'm from We Road. We are a travel company that is trying to get strangers to travel together and build new friendships. And I thought it was very interesting. All of you at some point touched on communities, which obviously are very interlinked with culture. I'm intrigued because I think that, in today's age, a lot of brands are saying are community-based businesses, when actually all they've got is an audience, really. So what would you say are the signals that businesses need to look out for to really sense that they're building a community and that there is something there more than just an audience? And for a European brand like ours, what tips would you give us as we start expanding into the US?
What a great question. Thank you for the question. I definitely have some thoughts on this. I think so many people say community when really it's one-way communication of a brand out to a group of people. You know what I mean? Like communicating out to your followers on Instagram or having this one-way relationship doesn't feel like community to me. That feels like distribution, to like directly to consumers, which is great, which is a thing, but it doesn't feel like community. I really think what you need to look for true kind of community-driven models is where the consumer is participating. They're contributing. They're not just receiving messages from the brand. They're invested somehow. They're doing something. They're participating. So I think with Kindred, one of the things that's been really powerful for us is just having a model where everybody definitionally needs to be both a guest and a host. They're not just here to consume this experience, pay to stay, somebody else makes this experience for me. Everybody has to contribute in order to participate, which puts skin in the game in a different kind of way and makes people feel really involved in the brand instead of just being kind of a passive consumer of a service somebody else is delivering for me. The other thing is leaning into allowing your community to shape the company, shape the product, and develop what your roadmap is and where you're going. One example for Kindred that we saw, so we created this Slack group for early members, as I mentioned, mostly to get product feedback and be like, hey, what do you guys think about this? People started using that Slack in a really interesting way, organically. Members started saying, hey, can I create a moms of toddlers Slack channel where I can hang out, chat with other Kindred members who are moms of toddlers? Or does anybody want to go get dinner? And we saw this kind of organic pull, this interest for our members to kind of participate in building this community. And we developed this events program where now, in a given month, there are many dozens of Kindred member hosted meetups happening all over the world. Sometimes they can apply for some budget from us and we'll help offset the cost, but it's things like dinner parties or dads taking their kids, in strollers on a walk on the Brooklyn Heights Promenade or a clothing swap or what have you. And I think that kind of active participation from your customers is what you need to really look for as a signal of is this a real community or is this just I have a social media following?
Yeah, I think, yes, so you are a European brand, right, trying to expand into a new geography. You gotta be strategic, right, I totally agree with what Justine described as community and audience. So we wouldn't venture to say that, we serve all our audiences, in a community, real authentic community engagement kind of way. So what we do is that we do look for kind of underserved communities where we could be uniquely positioned to, potentially serve better than the competition. Especially when you're new here, maybe probably have limited resources. I would encourage you to also be discerning about, which community that you can truly engage and serve well. The bookish example I used, right? We we have them on our own team. You know, our own teams are truly members of our community, and they have access to them. We really invited them to co-create, and when we were about to market a product, we also invited one of their own, this influencer, Rebecca, living in Ireland, this red-haired girl, like wearing corsets, those promoting the fashion of the era and the great landscape of that's like in those fantasy novels. So it's a full circle moment for us, and we definitely don't, we don't say that we approach every line that way. There are product lines where it's more mature licensed product, and it's a more of a plug and play. We still serve those audiences, but they are not like we just went off the menu probably.
Thank you.
Hello, all. Thank you for this great panel. My name is Misty, and I'm a campaign manager for a semiconductor company based in Germany. So a little bit different industry than what you all are representing today. But something I've noticed in particular in my space is we see trends, but we are very slow to react to cultural movements that happen. A lot of legal, a lot of hesitation. Just as an example, we are still evaluating if we should be on TikTok at this point in time. So my question to you is, when you're building a team or looking at a structure to react a little bit more quickly to cultural moments, how are you structuring those teams? What are you doing to encourage the people that work for you to come to you with ideas, to react quickly, or to tap into moments before they're 6 months past or a year past, or in TikTok's case, 5 years past, truthfully?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Misty. It's something we think a lot about. I don't know if I have an answer for you, and this isn't maybe specific to cultural trend, but I would say how I look at just decisions and the risk profile is, can we fix it fast? Or is it going to be expensive to fix? And if I answer like, hey, if this is a mistake and we can shift pretty quickly and it's not going to cost us a ton of money, that's a risk we'll take every day, right? And that risk profile is very expensive and very long, or short and cheap. And so, if you're trying to maybe even coach your own company, that'd be an interesting way to maybe phrase some of these opportunities that are taking a little while longer. But I think as we've grown and gotten bigger, it's speed and efficiency of decision making is likely one of the biggest challenges I face and continue to have to work on with our teams.
Okay, thank you.
I would love to thank every last one of you for your stories. Thank you guys for your questions, and also, I think as we look in the future, there's so many possibilities, and I just really want to thank you guys for all the hard work that you're doing for your teams, for you, and thank you, Matt Navarro, Justine, Palefsky, as well as Jiayu Lin.
Well, and thank you, Jameer. A round of applause for
Yeah.
great host and amazing shoes.
South by Southwest, the Sway Effect, and again, thank you guys so much. Happy Sunday. Have a great rest of your South by experience. Happy Sunday.
Thanks,
Thank you.